Now, I know that most of you are fully aware of how I feel about Elden Ring, and after reflecting on my initial video, I still pretty confidently stand by the points I made. However, there is one big takeaway from that video that I want everyone to listen to right now. No game is above criticism, no matter how close to perfect it may be. I think that Elden Ring is a fantastic game, but unfortunately plagued by a massive design issue. I can still like the game, but still have my criticisms with it, which seems to be a foreign concept to hardcore FromSoft fanboys. And with the recent release of Shadow of the Erdtree, I wanted to explore the realm of Shadow for myself and see what FromSoft decided to do. And unfortunately, my fears were realized. Before we continue, I want to state I've beaten the DLC 3 times now, once with a pure strength build that consisted of a plus 25 heavy giant crusher, then with a power stancing dex arcane build with 2 plus 10 reduvias, then with a dex faith hybrid surrounding black flame. I ran into some issues with that last build, but I will get to that. When Shadow of the Erdtree was announced, I was ecstatic, just like everyone else. I was excited that a game I love, despite my criticisms of it, is getting more content added to it. However, there was another thought I had, one that I'd repeatedly think about leading up to the release, and that thought was, just please be better than the base game, and, well, I'm sad to say it's not. In fact, it's kind of worse. Well, actually, that might not be completely true. In some areas, it is actually better than the base game. It could be that it's still so new to me, but every time I enter the gravesite plane, I'm just in awe of the stunning visuals that this expansion offers. All the way from the Cerulean Coast to the Abyssal Woods to the ancient ruins of Rao, this game looks stunning. FromSoft never fails to impress me when it comes to their visuals and the awe of seeing something grand for the first time. However, that wonder wears off really quickly once you get to exploring it. I believe that exploration is mostly encouraged and actually kind of required now because of the new blessing leveling system. It was kind of required in the base game, but it wasn't required to this degree. There are 2 types of new items to find, Erdtree fragments and revered spirit ashes. Erdtree fragments increase the amount of damage you deal and negates the amount of damage you take, while the revered spirit ashes negates the amount of damage Torrent and any spirit ash takes. So it is worth looking around and finding these, until it isn't. What I mean by that is, some of these fragments and ashes are so well hidden or in a place that you never think to look that you often feel like you've had your time wasted when you find literally everything except for the one thing you're looking for. An example I, along with many others, have is that I was exploring the overworld and I saw the bluish glowing item on a corpse. I go over to loot it and I find another cookbook when I've already found plenty of them that I am never going to use. Or that time I went to that lava intake and fought my way through thinking I'd get a fragment or spirit ash from a mini-boss. Instead, what I got was a new weapon and an ancient dragon smithing stone. Useful materials? Sure, but not the one useful thing that I actually needed. None of these fragments are in minor dungeons, eliminating the need to go and explore them. Instead, they're scattered all over the world, and in true FromSoft fashion, some are hidden in a very specific waterfall stream, some are on the main path to a boss, and some you have to take a very convoluted path just to find. The only boss that does drop these fragments are the golden hippos. Now, I actually wouldn't mind this if it wasn't exclusive to them. If other bosses in minor dungeons dropped them, or in some cases they were easier to find, I wouldn't be complaining at all. This is my very long-winded way of saying that exploration doesn't feel worth it compared to the base game. In base game Elden Ring, there are tons of minor dungeons you can do to gain quick runes. And in those caves, or catacombs, or tunnels, there are materials in each one, so even if the reward the boss dropped wasn't worth it, you at least got some useful materials and some runes out of it. It's not like that in the DLC. Something the Souls series taught me was to comb through an entire area so you'd find something cool or useful you would have missed otherwise. I did that for this DLC, and I wasn't rewarded for it. The only things I found were cookbook after cookbook and crafting materials I'm never going to use. I honestly think you're just better off looking up a guide to find these fragments because unless you're on the main path, you're not likely going to find them organically. Another key complaint I have is how these big areas are just so barren. Aside from some ruins and a couple of graveyards, what interesting things do these areas have? I've already established that, in my opinion, there's no real incentive to go find the minor dungeons, or if they're not a hippo or a shadow enemy with a pot on their head, there's no need to kill them. So what is there to do in these barren-ass areas? Find fragments and ashes? Well, I just wasted my time doing that by finding nothing but cookbooks and crafting materials, so I don't really feel the need to go out and find anything else. Cause if not the minor dungeons, that seems like that's all there is to do. The Abyssal Woods and the Finger Ruins are easily the biggest offenders of this. The Finger Ruins especially have nothing. You really only need to go there if you want to fight Metier, the giant Mother of Fingers boss. My problem isn't with the quest that requires you to go to them, it's that they're just so big and have really nothing to offer. Except for some really annoying worm enemies who will hit you with a spell that knocks you off of Torrent repeatedly while you're trying to traverse this wasteland. The Abyssal Woods are especially annoying to navigate. Not only is Torrent scared of this area, you can get grabbed by these enemies you can't attack and they one-shot you. I found out that you can damage them after parrying them once, but how am I supposed to know which attack to parry? Parrying a grab attack has never been a thing in any of the previous Souls games, so why would I be expected to do that now? And to add insult to injury, every single one of their attacks looks like the same grab. You could also sneak around them, but stealth is almost never encouraged in this game and no one uses it, so why would I ever think to do that? Not only are these enemies highly annoying to deal with, but the area also barely has anything to do. Aside from Midra, one of the DLC's best bosses, who I would argue is probably the only reason you should even go there in the first place. The Ancient Ruins of Rao is pretty barren too, with nothing super interesting or fun. It even houses an unnecessary reskin boss, which, again, I'll get to. There's some fragments to find and a hippo that drops one, but that's really it. Being honest, it's essentially just a glorified path to Romina. There's also a furnace golem there, but I think everybody feels the same about those. Now, I don't want to be entirely negative in this video, so I at least want to leave this section off on a positive note. Aside from stunning visuals, the way catacombs work in the DLC I think are a more welcome addition than the base game. Catacombs are annoying as fuck to navigate in Elden Ring, and they're easily the worst dungeon type, but in the DLC, they actually act as tunnels that connect to new areas, adding more to that awe factor I mentioned earlier. I'll try to bring up positives when I can, but in my honest opinion, there just isn't much positivity here to discuss. So now I guess we need to address the elephant in the room, that being this expansion's difficulty. Let me get this out of the way first. Is this DLC too hard? No. Is it harder than the base game? To me, yes. Is it unnecessarily hard? I believe so. Is it fun at least? At first, yes. After a while, not really. Lots of people have been critical over this expansion's difficulty and how much higher it is compared to the base game. This was easily my biggest concern going into it. I thought the base game was chock full of overtuned, overly aggressive bosses, and I was just hoping that FromSoft had listened to that feedback and dialed it back for this DLC. And unfortunately, they didn't. Every boss and even enemies are like if they took the Banished Knights in Malenia and cranked them to 11. They're highly aggressive, and even with a decent Erdtree blessing level, they still deal way too much damage. And just like the base game, I think it is harder, but for the wrong reasons. The first boss many likely encountered, including myself, was the Dancing Lion. He sets the stage perfectly for every other boss you'll be fighting. His first phase is tough, but albeit manageable. His second phase, however, is where he turns his aggressiveness into maximum overdrive. He switches between 3 elemental stages. First, he'll attack you, and lightning will strike immediately afterwards, basically acting as a roll catch if you successfully dodge his basic attack. No matter which direction you dodge, left, right, backwards, you're guaranteed to get hit by it, unless you're already a safe enough distance away. I'm looking at you, magic users. You could run, I guess, but there's a slight delay before your character starts their running animation, so if you do try to run, you'll probably get hit by the attack then, too. His ice stomps were annoying, but I'm also not very good at jumping them just yet, so I'm aware that that's a skill issue on my part. Same with his earth stage. On top of that, just like the base game, he has several delayed attacks that messed up my dodge timing many times and sucked all of the fun out of the fight. He'll also relentlessly attack with long combo strings, and as soon as he's done, he'll follow up with another immediately after, giving you no room to heal or attack or even breathe. I think it goes without saying, but the reuse of specific assets in the base game was unnecessary, despite what lore implications it might have. The biggest example was the reuse of Estelle in the Consecrated Snowfield. Him being specifically tied to Ranni's quest would have made for a much more enjoyable experience and a more unique fight if he only showed up during that point of the game, but he doesn't. When I was talking about the Ancient Ruins of Rao, I mentioned that there was an unnecessarily reskinned boss there, and that victim, unfortunately, is the Dancing Lion. He shows back up there, and while I personally haven't found him myself, according to other people who have, he doesn't really guard anything, so there's really no point for him to be there. And I know people will probably leave justified lore reasons down in the comments, but I honestly just don't care what lore reasons there would be for him to be here if he doesn't even guard anything. Whatever lore reasons there might be, it's just not a good enough excuse for him to be here. And that just sucks because it takes away the uniqueness and memorability of that first encounter with him, just like with Estelle. The second worst offender of this highly aggressive, overtuned boss trend in the DLC, though, is R'Lana. I heard people saying that she was like Pontiff on steroids, and while that may be true, at least Pontiff only requires one parry to get a successful repost. That's beside the point though. R'Lana has incredibly long combo strings and will often chain them together with no window of opportunity, basically turning her into a dodge simulator. And just like Dancing Lion's lightning, if you attack one of her swipes, the next is guaranteed to hit you. Dodging backwards was the most viable strategy I found when fighting her, and while my Mimic had her aggro, I would get some free damage in. Her worst attack, though, is her Twin Moon spell she'll cast that'll send a burst of magic on the ground of the entire arena 3 times, often one-shotting you if you're at full health. And once again, even if you have a decent Fragment Blessing level, this will still one-shot you. I just jumped 3 times in a row, and that worked just fine, but that doesn't mean that this move is immediately forgivable. I think that if it didn't cover the entire arena, or if it didn't deal as much damage, or even if she had a long recovery window to let you heal, it would be fine. But her long, high-damaging combos, aggression, magic spam, and one-shot attack culminate in a fight that's just overly hard in a not very fun way. I know that this is considered a hot take, but she is by far one of my least favorites in the DLC, and I hope she gets patched at some point. Midra, the Lord of Frenzied Flame, is easily one of my favorites. I don't have a lot to say about him, aside from that his tells are clear and he leaves just enough of a window to get one attack off, and his moves are very easy to dodge. However, he also has lots of Frenzied Flame spell casts, and if you get caught in too many, Madness build up into an attack can very easily one-shot you. Like I said, I don't really have much else to say other than that he is one of the only bosses in the entire DLC that feels truly fair. Commander Gaius further proves why Torrent needs armor or iframes implemented to some degree. If you get caught by any of his attacks, especially his charge, you're just fucked. It's so easy to get stun-locked in this fight, it's actually kind of ridiculous. He is easily the most aggressive mount-type boss. Anytime I tried to get away and heal, he'd close the gap in an instant and be right on top of me again, or he'd do some sort of attack that would knock me off of Torrent. I can't exactly enjoy a fight if I have to waste multiple flasks and risk dying by menuing to revive Torrent. On top of that, in true Elden Ring fashion, he also has a high health pool and deals way too much damage. In short, Commander Gaius just isn't very fun. I only fought him once for the 5 fragments near the chalice that he guards, and I'll never fight him again unless I'm going for those 5 fragments on a new playthrough. Mesmer is easily my favorite boss in the entire DLC. He has some delayed attacks, but once you get the timing down, they're not so bad to avoid. He's aggressive, but he has more clear openings than the Dancing Lion or R'Lana. Like Midra, you have enough time to get one attack in, and then it's back to dodging. He has a couple of combos I still have trouble dodging, but I would say it's due more to me making mistakes than it being an unfair attack. His openings only become more clear in Phase 2 when he transitions from his snake form back to human. There's not much else I really have to say. Mesmer is easily the most fair boss in the DLC in my opinion, and he's one of the very few I actually had fun fighting. Baal is a very interesting fight. My first time with him only took me a few tries before I beat him. I felt like I was too low of a level, so I went out, got some more blessing levels, and tackled him again a couple times before summoning Mimic. After that, it took me a couple more tries before I eventually got him down. Although I will say summoning Aigon is definitely the best way to do his fight. I thought he was tough with his lightning rain, and also like the Dancing Lion, half the time you're fighting the camera so you can't really see what's going on, but nothing too crazy to the point where I felt like it was too much. So I don't think this is exactly a hot take, but I think Baal is hard because you're fighting the camera more than him half the time. Baal can be tough, but he's not the hardest fight in the DLC. Also, I understand that Baal's heart works the same as a Remembrance, but come on FromSoft, just patch in a Remembrance for Baal. Just do it. The same can't be said about the final fight, though. This will be my second warning. If you have not played Shadow of the Erdtree yet and you don't want to be spoiled, click off now. That being said, the final boss of the DLC is Redon. Now, I've never been one to complain about lore or spoilers with these games, so when it came to what I assumed to be Prime Redon, I immediately bought the DLC with zero hesitation. Redon in the base game is one of my favorite fights, so to say I was disappointed with this fight would be a massive understatement. I also just want to go ahead and clarify that these are my pre-nerf thoughts, since Consort Redon did get nerfed in a recent patch. So just to give you guys a heads up, I will be going through my post-nerf thoughts as well. Anyways, this is easily the hardest boss FromSoft has ever made, and it's not even close. The fact that he somehow tops Malenia is just absolutely asinine to me. I would be fine if he was the capstone challenge for the DLC, but like the base game, he's hard for the wrong reasons, and I'm fully anticipating him to be patched in the near future. This was also the only boss in FromSoft history that got me to build switch to something more manageable, since using incantations or spells is out of my typical wheelhouse. This is what I meant by I ran into some issues with my Black Flame build. Trying to find any wiggle room to use my incantations felt non-existent, because I know how using incantations and sorceries works. You have to keep your distance, except the problem is Consort Redon will close the gap on you in an instant and then never let up, so it felt practically impossible to get any hit off on him with an incantation. So, thusly, I switched back to my power stancing Reduvia build. Anyways, getting back to the fight. His first phase, while yet again tough, is manageable. His tells are clear, you can dodge his attacks easily, no issues, right? Well, except for the fact that he'll attack you as soon as you enter the arena, but I digress. He has one combo where he crosses his one sword over the other and swipes them back out. The second cross is the one that gets people the most, and it's described as non-dodgeable. This has since been patched, and now you can actually dodge this attack like you're supposed to. Pre-nerf, I was able to dodge it, but it was incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes I would get caught in a roll, other times I wouldn't. This, again, felt like a roll catch, because his sword swings one way, and the other swings the other way, and his swords are massive, so you can't dodge backwards. Where are you supposed to go? On a side note, this is probably the third time I've brought up roll catching, and ordinarily it wouldn't be an issue, it's just that when you dodge to a very clear spot where an attack shouldn't hit you, they have a follow-up where it's guaranteed to hit you, and most, if not all of the bosses in this DLC have a roll catching attack to some degree. You'll often have to dodge a 2-hit combo in one roll, and the iframes with it are incredibly inconsistent. That's my unnecessary rant on roll catching. I'm fine with it as a means to communicate to the player to dodge in a different direction, but when they're added to these already hyper-aggressive challenges as a follow-up attack, and there's nothing you can do about it, they no longer become fun. They become frustrating. Anyways, getting back on track, the other big attack I have a complaint with is his Starcaller Cry into Gravity Crossblade, where he'll pull you in and create Earth Spikes with gravity magic. You can avoid this attack, but your dodge timing has to be exact, and I still haven't really found a reliable way to dodge out of the Gravity Crossblade. I found a guide that said to dodge away from him, but even doing so, I still got hit. I honestly really don't think there is a reliable strategy to dodge this attack. You just have to learn the timing for Starcaller Cry and hope you don't get sucked in. That's not even the worst part, though. Phase 2 is where it went from manageable to just blatant bullshit, in my opinion. If a couple of his attacks didn't feel fair enough already, now every attack, including those two, has a Holy Beam follow-up, and it, once again, acts as a roll catch. If you get caught even once, consider yourself screwed. He'll start one attack, Holy will follow up, another, Holy will follow up, and then chain another combo with it, Holy following up, and never lets up. I've learned recently that parrying him significantly reduces the challenge of the fight, but parrying in Elden Ring, in my opinion, is just incredibly tedious and not satisfying whatsoever. Needing to pull off 3 successful parries before you get a repost is utterly insane to me. Past entries rewarded your swift timing and quick action with a critical attack. Not Elden Ring. You need to pull it off 3 times to do it, and for a boss like this, it's just not worth it to parry, dodge, 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 get another parry, rinse, and repeat. Maybe some of you enjoy this, and that's fine. I just don't personally. And if that wasn't bad enough, all of his combos look very similar and have different timings, causing you to get hit many, many times. All of his attacks can easily 2 or 3 shot you, even at max blessing level. There's legitimately no room to attack or heal. This fight is just the epitome of dodge simulator. You just dodge, dodge, and dodge, where the boss doesn't let you have a turn to do much of anything. And I get that FromSoft wanted to keep the challenge for the DLC high, but they shouldn't have gone the route they did. I think that they went way too overboard and didn't take fun into account when designing not just Consort Redon, but the rest of the DLC. Combo after combo with no windows of opportunity isn't fun. It's exhausting. Those are my pre-nerf thoughts about Consort Redon. I thought he was way too overtuned, and he felt like he wasn't properly tested before release, because there's no way someone at FromSoft said that this didn't feel like it was too much. Now, there have been a lot of changes made, and thankfully they're for the better. Firstly, his opening attack doesn't start immediately, so you can chug your physic or summon if you feel so inclined. And like I said earlier, you can dodge his crossover slash normally now. Now, those are the only changes made to Phase 1, since Phase 2 is where all the bullshit is. The lighting effect on the AoE has been reduced, thusly improving performance, and after his mid-air clone attack, he doesn't immediately follow up, but he does pretty soon after. He now has a window after his Blood Flame Slash, and the hitbox on his slam into the meteors is removed. Now, like I said, these changes are for the better, and he's a much more reasonable fight now, but that doesn't remove the sour taste from my mouth when I experienced him for the first time. So with all of that being said, if their goal was to make the final boss of an already unnecessarily punishing DLC to the point where it feels impossible, well then they succeeded. Consort Redon is easily the most exhausting boss in FromSoft history, and I'll never forget him for spitting in my face instead of respecting me for bettering him in a fight. Now before I go, I want everyone to pay attention to what I'm about to say. I never said that I outright hate this DLC or that I think it's too hard. I just don't think it's perfect in the same way that most FromSoft fans do. In fact, one major thing I prefer over the base game is the score. Consort Redon's theme specifically is easily one of the best pieces ever composed for a video game in my opinion. And I've seen just how rabid FromSoft fans can be about Elden Ring and its DLC, so just let me leave with this. If you truly love Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree and think it's the best work FromSoft has ever made, and you disagree with me and think I'm wrong because I'm criticizing FromSoft and Elden Ring because they're so perfect, then that's fine. Keep playing and have fun. I just don't agree with the general consensus that Elden Ring or Shadow of the Erdtree is FromSoft's magnum opus. I think they've done better than this, and if things were different, Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree would easily be my favorite work FromSoft has ever done. But because of certain design choices, it's just not. I'll never forget the first time I stepped foot in the Lands Between, nor will I forget the first time I set foot in the Shadow Realm. But I'd rather leave and go back to Lothric or Yharnam, because at least those guys were fair. Thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one.